I remember that morning like it was yesterday. The autumn sun streamed through our kitchen window, casting long shadows across the granite countertop where Emma always left her coffee cup. Only this time, there was no coffee cup. No familiar scent of her vanilla hazelnut blend filling the air. Just a white envelope propped against the fruit bowl, my name written in her delicate handwriting. I stood there for what felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than minutes. Upstairs, I could hear Tommy babbling in his crib, probably talking to his stuffed giraffe like he did every morning. Our son, just 2 years old and completely unaware that his world was about to change forever. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. The letter inside was brief, almost clinical. "I can't do this anymore," it began. "I've found someone else. We're leaving for Barcelona today. I'm sorry." The words blurred as I read them, my vision clouding with tears I refused to let fall. The silence in the house felt deafening. I mechanically climbed the stairs to Tommy's room, each step heavier than the last. He beamed when he saw me, his little arms reaching up, dark curls wild from sleep, so much like his mother's. "Dada!" he chirped, and something inside me cracked. I lifted him from the crib, holding him close, breathing in his baby shampoo scent. "It's just you and me now, buddy," I whispered, my voice rough. "Just you and me." The next few hours passed in a daze. I called in sick to work, fed Tommy his breakfast, and tried to process what had happened. 8 years of marriage, erased in a few sentences. No warning signs, or had there been, and I'd been too blind to see them. The business trips that had gotten more frequent, the late-night phone calls she'd take in the garden, the growing distance I'd attributed to new parent exhaustion. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from her family, as confused and shocked as I was. Her mother's voice cracked when I called her, dissolving into tears. "We had no idea," she kept saying. "We had no idea she'd do this." By evening, reality began to sink in. I sat on my bedroom floor, Tommy asleep in his room, surrounded by the debris of Emma's hasty packing. Half-empty drawers, discarded hangers, the lingering scent of her perfume. On her nightstand, her wedding ring sat like a small, mocking reminder of everything we'd promised each other. I picked up the ring, its weight familiar in my palm. Memories flooded back, our first date at that little Italian restaurant, the nervous proposal in Central Park, our wedding day when she'd smiled so brightly I thought my heart would burst. Now each memory felt tainted, questionable. Had any of it been real? Tommy's cry from the next room snapped me back to the present. As I got up to comfort him, I caught my reflection in the mirror, pale, shell-shocked, eyes red-rimmed. But beneath the pain and betrayal, something else flickered in my gaze. A spark of determination, maybe? Or survival instinct. "We're going to be okay," I told my reflection, straightening my shoulders. I didn't quite believe it yet, but I knew I had to make it true. For Tommy. For myself. And maybe, just maybe, to show Emma exactly what she'd walked away from. The first month without Emma felt like drowning in slow motion. Every morning, I'd wake up reaching for her side of the bed, finding only cold sheets and the echo of her absence. The house seemed to mock me with its emptiness, her coffee mug still in the dishwasher, her favorite sweater forgotten behind the laundry door, her shampoo bottle in the shower I couldn't bring myself to throw away. But Tommy needed me. That simple truth became my anchor, the reason to keep moving when everything else felt impossible. I learned to navigate our new reality one small victory at a time. The first time I successfully French braided his fine hair before daycare. The evening I managed to cook a proper meal instead of ordering takeout. The night he fell asleep in my arms while I read Goodnight Moon, the book Emma used to read, and I didn't cry. Work became both escape and challenge. My boss, Mark, showed unexpected understanding when I explained the situation. "Take the time you need," he said, adjusting my schedule to accommodate single parenthood. Still, I caught the pitying glances from coworkers, heard the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the break room. The golden boy's perfect life, shattered. I wanted to scream that they didn't know anything about perfection or shattering. Nights were the worst. After Tommy fell asleep, the silence would creep in, heavy with questions. I'd find myself scrolling through Emma's social media, hunting for clues I might have missed. Her accounts went dark the day she left, but mutual friends still posted. A glimpse of her in the background of a photo tagged in Barcelona, her hair lighter, her smile directed at someone just out of frame. Each image felt like reopening a wound. My mother moved in temporarily to help, bringing with her the comfort of familiar routines and unconditional support. She'd watch Tommy while I went to therapy, something I'd started at her gentle insistence. "You need to process this properly," she'd said, "for both your sakes." She was right, though admitting it felt like another small defeat. The therapist, Dr. Chin, helped me understand that what I was feeling wasn't just grief for my marriage, but mourning for the future I'd thought was certain. "You're not just losing a wife," she explained during one session. "You're losing a story you'd written in your head about how your life would go." The hardest part was answering Tommy's questions. "Mama?" he'd ask, pointing at her photos. "Soon," I'd lie, hating myself for it. "How do you explain abandonment to a 2-year-old? Dr. Chin suggested age-appropriate honesty, but every attempt stuck in my throat. One evening, as I was putting Tommy to bed, he looked at me with Emma's eyes and asked, "Mama mad at Tommy?" The question knocked the wind out of me. I gathered him close, fighting back tears. "No, buddy. Mama has some things she needs to figure out. But it's not because of you. Never because of you." That night, after he was asleep, I sat in our home office and opened my laptop. The blank document stared back at me as I began typing. Goals for the next year. It felt silly, almost teenage-like, but Dr. Chin had suggested concrete planning as a way forward. I started small. Learn to cook 5 solid meals. Find a better daycare schedule. Get back to the gym. Then, gaining momentum. Complete the software certification I've been putting off. Look into that promotion at work. Maybe start dating again? The last one I deleted immediately. The thought of letting someone else into our fragile new world felt impossible. As I wrote, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time since Emma left, I felt something like hope, not the desperate kind that had me checking my phone for messages from her, but something steadier. A sense that maybe, just maybe, we could build something new from the wreckage she'd left behind. 3 months after Emma left, I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror at 5:30 a.m., studying my reflection like a stranger. Dark circles had taken permanent residence under my eyes, and my clothes hung loose. I hadn't even noticed losing weight. The man staring back at me looked hollow, worn thin by sleepless nights and unanswered questions. That morning marked a change. I'd woken before my alarm, the house still wrapped in pre-dawn silence, and felt something different stirring in my chest. Not the familiar ache of absence, but a quiet determination. My mother had left the week before, satisfied that Tommy and I had found some semblance of routine. Now it was truly just us. I started small. A set of push-ups on the bedroom floor, muscles protesting from months of neglect. 20 minutes of free weights I'd found gathering dust in the garage. By the time Tommy's morning babbles echoed through the baby monitor, sweat had soaked through my shirt, and my arms trembled. But beneath the physical exhaustion lurked something I hadn't felt in months, a ghost of pride. The changes continued, barely noticeable at first. I replaced the takeout menus magnetized to our fridge with printed recipes. Simple things at first, pasta dishes, slow cooker meals I could start before work. Tommy became my unexpected sous chef, perched safely in his high chair, gleefully stirring plastic measuring cups while I chopped vegetables. Some nights we failed spectacularly. The smoke detector became a frequent dinner guest, but sometimes we created something actually edible. Work noticed the shift too. The pitying glances faded as I threw myself into projects, staying late after Tommy's bedtime to study for my certification. Mark mentioned a team lead position opening up in the fall. "You should consider it," he said, sliding the job description across his desk. "You've got the technical skills, and lately, there's something different about you." I found myself looking at Emma's photos less frequently, though she still haunted my dreams. In them, she was always just out of reach, laughing that bright laugh that used to fill our home. I'd wake with her name caught in my throat, only to hear Tommy calling, "Dada!" from his room, pulling me back to reality. The worst moment came when Tommy had his first major tantrum in the grocery store. He wanted the cereal with the cartoon character, the kind Emma always bought, and I'd said no. His screams drew stares from other shoppers, their faces a mix of sympathy and judgment. A young mother approached, offering help, but I saw the wedding ring on her finger and couldn't bear her kindness. We left the cart right there, Tommy wailing in my arms all the way to the car. In the parking lot, I broke down too. We sat there together, father and son, both crying for different versions of the same loss. When his sobs finally quieted to hiccups, he patted my face with his small hand. "Dada sad?" he asked, and I realized he was comforting me. That night, after an improvised dinner of grilled cheese and apple slices, I made a decision. The boxes of Emma's remaining things still cluttered our garage, waiting for her to arrange collection. I spent hours sorting through them, finally packing everything into neat containers labeled with her name. The next day, I contacted her parents and arranged for them to ship it all to Barcelona. With each item I packed, her old college sweatshirt, photo albums, the pottery she'd collected, memories surfaced and receded like waves. But now they felt less like drowning and more like swimming towards something distant but reachable. The last thing I packed was our wedding album. I allowed myself one final look, tracing the outline of her face in our first dance photo. We looked so young, so certain. I thought about the people we were then, full of dreams and promises. Then I closed the album, placed it in the box, and sealed it shut. That weekend, I signed up for a gym membership and hired a babysitter for 2 mornings a week. I bought new clothes that actually fit, scheduled a haircut, and enrolled in an evening cooking class that worked around Tommy's schedule. Small steps, each one barely noticeable on its own, but together they felt like plotting a course through uncertain waters. In quiet moments, I still wondered where she was, what she was doing. But increasingly, these thoughts came with a different kind of ache, not the sharp pain of fresh betrayal, but something duller, more distant. Like pressing on an old bruise to see if it still hurt. 6 months into our new life, I discovered something unexpected about loneliness. It has texture, weight, different shades like paint swatches in a hardware store. There's the thin, sharp loneliness of waking up alone, different from the heavy blanket of Sunday afternoons when parents in the park walked in pairs, pushing strollers and sharing private jokes. Then there's the loneliness that visits during achievements, when there's no one to share the small victories with. The day I received my software certification, I celebrated by taking Tommy for ice cream. He smeared chocolate all over his face, giggling as I cleaned him up, completely unaware of why this day mattered. I snapped a photo of us together, his face sticky and beaming, mine trying too hard to look carefree. My finger hovered over Emma's contact for a full minute before I put the phone away. The gym became my sanctuary, a place where pain made sense. Each rep, each mile on the treadmill felt like burning away pieces of my old self. My trainer, Marcus, never asked about the wedding ring tan line that was slowly fading from my finger. Instead, he pushed me harder, as if he could read the anger fueling my movements. "Channel it," he'd say during particularly brutal sessions. "But don't let it consume you." Work transformed too. The team lead position started feeling less like a distant possibility, and more like an inevitability. I found myself staying late at the office, not to avoid an empty house anymore, but because I was actually excited about our projects. The new developer we hired, Rachel, often worked late too. She had a quiet competence that made collaboration easy, and a dry sense of humor that sometimes startled laughs out of me when I least expected them. One evening, as we debugged code together, she asked about Tommy's photo on my desk. The conversation flowed naturally to single parenthood. She'd been raised by her dad after her mother died. There was no pity in her eyes when I mentioned Emma's departure, just understanding. For the first time, I told the story without feeling like I was picking at a scab. That night, I dreamed of Emma. Not the usual dreams of her leaving, but of our first apartment, how we'd sat on boxes eating takeout, planning our future. In the dream, she turned to me and said something that lingered after I woke. Some futures only exist so we can leave them behind. Tommy's third birthday approached like a storm cloud on the horizon. Emma's silence had become absolute, not even a card for her son. Her parents sent gifts and called regularly, their voices always careful, measuring their words as if afraid to spill secrets. I wondered if they knew where she was, if she was happy, if she ever woke up reaching for our son like I sometimes caught him reaching for her in his sleep. The party itself was a small affair in our backyard. My mother insisted on helping, arriving days early to transform our patio into a dinosaur paradise. Tommy ran around in a T-Rex costume, roaring at guests and dissolving into giggles when they roared back. Rachel came, bringing a coding book for toddlers that made me laugh out loud. She fit seamlessly into our strange little gathering, helping serve cake and later staying to clean up while Tommy napped, exhausted from his big day. "You're doing good, you know," she said as we washed dishes side by side. "Both of you." The simple words hit harder than any therapy session. I gripped the edge of the sink, suddenly overwhelmed by emotions I couldn't name. She quietly handed me a dishcloth and continued washing, giving me space to pull myself together. That evening, after everyone left, I found a small photo that had slipped under the couch, an old one of Emma holding newborn Tommy. My chest tightened, but the pain felt different now. Less like a knife twist, more like pressing on a healing wound. I slipped the photo into a box in my closet, next to the wedding album I'd never sent to Barcelona. Later, putting Tommy to bed, he asked his now familiar question about Mama. But this time, he added something new. "Is Mama coming to my next birthday?" The hope in his voice cut deep. I held him closer, searching for words that wouldn't become lies. "I don't know, buddy," I finally said. "But you know what? You and me, we're going to have amazing birthdays together, no matter what." As I watched him drift off to sleep, I realized something had shifted. The future I was building didn't feel like a consolation prize anymore. It felt like something real, something earned. The man in the mirror was starting to look less like Emma's abandoned husband and more like someone I might actually want to be. Autumn crept in again, painting the world in the same colors that had surrounded Emma's departure a year ago. I found myself pausing at the kitchen window each morning, watching leaves spiral down from the maple tree where Tommy's swing hung. The same window where I'd found her note, now reflecting back a different man, shoulders broader from the gym, jaw more defined, eyes carrying a weight that hadn't been there before. Rachel had become a constant in our lives, her presence so gradual I hardly noticed the transition. She'd drop by with dinner when work ran late, knowing I'd be wrestling with Tommy's bedtime routine. She taught Tommy simple coding games that made him squeal with delight, and never flinched when he called her Reiki in his toddler pronunciation. Sometimes, catching her dark hair in my peripheral vision, my heart would stutter before remembering it wasn't Emma, and then, increasingly, feeling relief that it wasn't. The promotion came through on a Wednesday. Mark called me into his office, his usual stern expression cracking into a rare smile as he extended the offer letter. "Team lead, with a salary that made my eyes widen. You earned this," he said. "And not just with your technical skills. The team respects you. They see how you've handled everything." That evening, I sat at our dining table long after Tommy was asleep, staring at the offer letter. Success should have tasted sweeter, but it came with an aftertaste of something bitter. Part of me wanted to scan the letter and send it to Emma, to show her I wasn't the man she'd left behind. The thought made me sick, both the desire to prove something to her and the realization that I still cared what she thought. Rachel came over that Saturday to help me replace the kitchen faucet, a project I'd been putting off for months. As we worked together in the confined space under the sink, her shoulder occasionally brushing mine, I found myself hyper-aware of her presence. The scent of her shampoo, different from Emma's but pleasant in its own way. The sound of her laugh when I accidentally sprayed us both with water. The gentle way she handled Tommy when he insisted on helping. "You know," she said, wiping her hands on a towel after we finished, "there's this tech conference in Boston next month. The company's sending a few people. You should come. Her tone was casual, but something flickered in her eyes that made my pulse quicken. It would be good for the new position. I heard myself declining before I'd really processed the invitation. Tommy. I couldn't leave him. The excuse sounded hollow even to my ears. Rachel's expression didn't change, but something shuddered behind her eyes. That night, I lay awake analyzing every moment of our interaction. The truth wasn't about Tommy. My mother would have been happy to watch him. The truth was that accepting felt like betrayal, not of Emma, but of the pain I'd been carrying. As if moving forward meant everything we'd had was less real, less significant. I found myself opening my phone's photo gallery, scrolling back through the years to our wedding photos. Emma in her white dress, both of us impossibly young and certain. But for the first time, I noticed something in those photos I hadn't seen before, a tension in her smile, a distance in her eyes even then. Or was I just rewriting history to make her leaving make sense? The next morning, I called Rachel. My heart pounded as I asked if the conference invitation was still open. Her pause felt eternal before she said yes. We talked about logistics, keeping our voices professionally neutral, but underneath ran a current of something undefined, terrifying in its potential. After hanging up, I walked into Tommy's room. He was playing with his blocks, building towers just to knock them down, finding joy in both creation and destruction. He looked up at me with Emma's eyes, but the smile was entirely his own. Build with me, Dada? He asked, offering me a red block. As I sat cross-legged on his floor, helping him create something new from scattered pieces, I realized that moving forward didn't mean erasing the past. The pain of Emma's betrayal had carved channels in me that would always be there, like rivers cutting through rock. But maybe those same channels could carry something new, something different, if I was brave enough to let them. The Boston conference loomed closer, casting long shadows across my daily routine. Each morning, as I helped Tommy with his breakfast, I caught myself rehearsing reasons to cancel. The weight of potential change felt suffocating, like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing the next step would change everything. Rachel kept her distance at work, maintaining a careful professional facade that somehow made everything harder. I found myself studying her when she wasn't looking, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear while concentrating, how her fingers danced across the keyboard with precise confidence, the slight curve of her smile when she solved a particularly challenging problem. Each observation felt like a small betrayal, not of Emma anymore, but of the comfortable numbness I'd built around myself. A week before the conference, Tommy got sick. Nothing serious, just a typical preschool cold, but watching him sleep fitfully in his dinosaur pajamas, his cheeks flushed with fever, cracked something open inside me. I remembered the night he was born, how Emma and I had stood over his hospital bassinet, terrified and amazed by this tiny person we'd created. Now here I was, contemplating letting someone new into his world, into our carefully balanced life. My mother arrived to stay with Tommy, bringing her particular blend of support and subtle questioning. Rachel, she said one evening, testing the name like sampling an unfamiliar dish. She sounds nice. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken implications. She is nice, I replied, suddenly fascinated by the contents of my coffee cup. She's just Rachel. Even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Rachel wasn't just anything. The night before leaving for Boston, I found myself in the garage, opening a box I'd sealed months ago. Emma's scent had faded from her old sweater, but holding it still sent echoes of memory coursing through me. Photos spilled across my lap, our honeymoon in Greece, Christmas mornings, lazy Sundays in bed. I studied her face in each one, searching for signs I might have missed, clues to explain how she could have walked away from everything we'd built. But something was different now. The images felt like scenes from someone else's life, a movie I'd watched but hadn't starred in. The pain was still there, but it had transformed into something else, a dull ache, like an old injury that predicts rain. The conference itself passed in a blur of presentations and networking, but every moment with Rachel felt crystalline in its clarity. We fell into an easy rhythm, sharing coffee between sessions, finishing each other's sentences during technical discussions. At dinner with colleagues, I found myself watching her hands as she talked, the way she used them to illustrate points, elegant and expressive. On the last night, we ended up walking through Boston's historic streets, our conversation meandering like our footsteps. The city lights reflected off the harbor, and a cool breeze carried the salt tang of the ocean. Rachel stopped at a viewpoint, leaning against the railing. "Tommy would love this," she said softly, gesturing at a passing boat. "He's obsessed with anything that moves, isn't he?" The casual way she included my son, understanding he was an inseparable part of any future, made my chest tight. She wasn't trying to replace anyone, she was simply accepting what was, all the complicated pieces that made up our life. "I'm scared," I admitted, the words escaping before I could catch them. "Not of this, exactly. But of what it means. Of what could go wrong. Of what Tommy might." Rachel turned to face me, her expression serious in the half-light. "Fear means you care," she said simply. "It means you're paying attention. Being fearless isn't brave, being afraid and moving forward anyway, that's brave." Standing there, watching the play of light across her face, I realized something profound. The opposite of betrayal isn't blind trust, it's choosing to be vulnerable again, knowing full well how much it could hurt. It's looking at your scars and deciding they're proof of survival, not warnings against trying again. I reached for her hand, my fingers trembling slightly. She interlaced her fingers with mine, and we stood in silence, watching the boats drift by, each lost in thoughts of what might come next. The future stretched before us, uncertain but somehow less threatening than it had been before. The morning light filtered through my bedroom window, casting familiar shadows on unfamiliar emotions. 2 weeks had passed since Boston, since that moment by the harbor when something shifted between Rachel and me. Now every text from her carried the weight of possibility, each shared glance at work held layers of unspoken meaning. Tommy noticed the change first, with that uncanny perception children possess. "Reiki makes you smile different," he observed one evening as we built a Lego tower together. His words caught me off guard, making me fumble the plastic brick I was holding. He was right, I did smile differently around her. It wasn't the carefree grin of my life with Emma, but something more tentative, more aware of its own fragility. That night, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in months, scrolling through Emma's Instagram, which had suddenly become active again. Recent photos showed her in Barcelona, laughing in sunlit cafes, her arm around a dark-haired man I didn't recognize. The sight didn't wound me as it once would have, but it stirred something else, a complex mixture of anger and gratitude. Anger at her casual dismissal of our family, gratitude that her absence had forced me to become someone stronger. Rachel and I navigated our evolving relationship with careful steps, both hyper-aware of the stakes involved. She came over for dinner more frequently, but always when Tommy was awake, always maintaining clear boundaries. We'd sit on opposite ends of the couch while Tommy showed us his latest artwork, both conscious of the space between us, electric with unspoken possibilities. One Saturday afternoon, while Tommy was at a playdate, Rachel helped me sort through old photos for a digital album I was making him. We sat cross-legged on my living room floor, surrounded by memories captured on glossy paper. She handled each photo with remarkable sensitivity, especially the ones with Emma. "Tell me about this one," she said softly, holding up a picture of Tommy's first steps. I stared at Emma's hands in the photo, reaching out to catch our son as he wobbled forward. The memory rose up, thick with emotion, not just of that moment, but of all the moments that would never be. "Sometimes I wonder," I found myself saying, "if she ever misses him. If she wakes up reaching for him like I still do sometimes." Rachel's hand found mine among the scattered photos, her touch grounding me in the present. "You know what I admire about you?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. "You never speak ill of her to Tommy. You're protecting his heart even while yours is breaking." Her words cracked something open inside me, releasing tears I hadn't known were waiting. That evening, after Rachel left, I received an unexpected email from Emma's mother. Attached was a recent photo of Emma with her new partner, looking relaxed and happy. She wanted you to know, the message read, that she's finally found herself. The words should have been cruel, but instead, they felt like the final key turning in a lock I hadn't known was still closed. I took Tommy to the park the next day, watching him navigate the jungle gym with growing confidence. Rachel joined us, bringing hot chocolate and those cookies he loved. As she helped him across the monkey bars, her hands steady and patient, I saw the scene with startling clarity, not as a replacement for what was lost, but as something entirely new taking shape. Later, while Tommy napped on the couch, Rachel and I stood in the kitchen washing dishes. The domesticity of the moment struck me, how natural it felt. Then she flicked soap suds at me, breaking the tension, making me laugh. It wasn't the carefree laugh of my younger self, but something richer, more earned. I need you to know something, I said, drying my hands slowly. I'm not fixed. I don't know if I'll ever be completely unmarked by what happened. The words felt clumsy, inadequate. Rachel set down the plate she was washing, turning to face me fully. I'm not looking for someone unmarked, she replied. I'm looking for someone real. Someone who understands that love is a choice you make every day, especially on the days when it's hardest. In that moment, surrounded by the gentle sounds of my son's breathing and the fading afternoon light, I felt the full weight of what was being offered, not just a chance at romance, but at redemption. Not from Emma's betrayal, but from the belief that betrayal was all that was left for me. The truth arrived like a stone through glass, shattering the careful peace I'd built. It was Rachel who discovered it, though she hadn't been looking. A simple database merge at work revealed what Emma had tried to hide: unauthorized transfers from company accounts, dating back to the months before she left, all pointing to a carefully orchestrated plan. The evidence lay spread across my kitchen table like a roadmap of betrayal: transaction records, email threads, falsified documents. Each piece revealed a story far different from the one I'd told myself about her sudden departure. This wasn't a spontaneous flight for love, it was a calculated escape with stolen money. I'm so sorry, Rachel whispered, her hand hovering near mine but not quite touching, understanding that sometimes comfort itself can be an intrusion. I had to tell you. The company's launching an investigation. The implications settled like ash. Emma hadn't just left us, she'd been planning her exit for months, maybe longer. Those late-night phone calls hadn't been to a lover but to banks in Barcelona. Her increasing business trips had been covers for meeting with accomplices. The man she'd left with wasn't just her new partner, he was her co-conspirator. Tommy's drawings hung on the refrigerator behind us, crayon sketches of our family, now including Rachel with her characteristic dark ponytail. The sight of them made my throat tight. How many layers of lies had Emma wrapped around our son's life before walking away? My hands shook as I picked up my phone, scrolling through old photos with new understanding. Every smile, every tender moment from our last months together, all of it had been performance. While I'd been planning our future, she'd been systematically dismantling it. The company wants to press charges, Rachel continued softly, her words dropping like stones into still water. They need to know if you'll cooperate with the investigation. The irony wasn't lost on me, how I'd spent months thinking I hadn't been enough for Emma, when in reality, I'd been nothing but a convenient cover. The devoted husband, the stable home, the perfect facade while she orchestrated her real plans. That night, after Rachel left, I sat in Tommy's room watching him sleep. His small chest rose and fell peacefully, one arm wrapped around the stuffed giraffe Emma had given him before she left. Her last gift, I now realized, had been an attempt at absolution. Memories resurfaced with devastating clarity: Emma's insistence on handling our finances, her careful questions about my company's security protocols, the way she'd gradually withdrawn our savings for Tommy's future. Each recollection sparked new connections, painting a picture of methodical deception. The next morning, I found myself staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, studying the man Emma had deemed expendable enough to use as a shield. But the face looking back wasn't the broken one I'd expected to see. Instead, I saw someone who had survived, grown stronger, learned to trust again despite carrying wounds she'd inflicted. Rachel called, her voice tight with concern. "You don't have to decide anything right now," she said. But we both knew I did. Every moment of indecision was another moment Emma's deception controlled our lives. I thought about Tommy, about the stories I'd told him of his mother finding herself in Barcelona. How would I explain this new truth to him someday? How would I help him understand that sometimes the people we love most can wear masks so convincing we never see their real faces? The company's legal team wanted to meet that afternoon. As I dressed for the meeting, I caught myself reaching for the tie Emma had given me last Christmas. I let my hand fall, choosing instead the one Rachel had commented on last week, deep blue, the color of trust and truth. In the end, the decision crystallized not around justice or revenge, but around peace. Emma hadn't just stolen money, she'd stolen years of truth from our lives. Cooperating with the investigation wasn't about punishment, it was about reclaiming our story, about showing Tommy that sometimes courage means facing painful truths head on. The days following the revelation blurred together like watercolors in rain. Each morning brought new developments, meetings with corporate lawyers, calls from investigators, documents requiring my signature. The evidence of Emma's deception spread like dark roots through every memory, tainting even the moments I'd thought were pure. Rachel kept her distance at work, understanding that some wounds need space to breathe. But I caught her watching me across conference rooms, her eyes carrying the weight of someone who knows they've irreversibly changed another person's world. In quiet moments between meetings, she'd leave coffee on my desk, small anchors to reality when everything else felt unmoored. Tommy sensed the shift in atmosphere, the way children intuitively know when their world is trembling. He became clingy, refusing to sleep in his own bed, watching me with Emma's eyes that now felt like another layer of betrayal. One night, as I held him through another nightmare, he whispered, "Did Mama take the bad money?" The question gutted me. Apparently, he'd overheard a conversation between my mother and me. I pulled him closer, breathing in the sweet scent of his shampoo, searching for words that wouldn't become new wounds. "Sometimes," I finally said, "grown-ups make mistakes that hurt people they love. But that doesn't mean they never loved at all." Even as I said it, I wondered if it was true. Had Emma ever loved us, or had we simply been convenient props in her elaborate performance? The thought followed me through sleepless nights, making me question every memory. That photo of her crying when Tommy was born, had those tears been real? The way she'd held my hand through my father's funeral, had that comfort been genuine, or just another calculated gesture? Rachel found me one evening in the office, long after everyone else had left. I was staring at old company photos, ones where Emma stood smiling among colleagues she'd betrayed. Without a word, Rachel sat beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched. "I keep thinking," I said into the silence, "about all the moments I missed. All the signs I should have seen." She turned to face me, her expression fierce in the dim light. "Stop. You missed nothing because there was nothing to see. That's what makes betrayal so devastating. The person you trust most becomes the best at hiding their truth from you." Her words cracked something open inside me, releasing a flood of emotions I'd been damming up. Anger, not just at Emma's theft, but at how she'd stolen my ability to trust my own memories. Grief for the man I'd been, who believed in unconditional love. Relief, strangely, that at least now I knew the whole truth. The investigation moved forward with methodical precision. Each new detail revealed felt like another key unlocking parts of our shared past. The trips to Barcelona hadn't started with her lover, they'd begun months earlier, establishing connections, setting up accounts. The man she'd left with was someone she'd met through her financial schemes, their romance blooming in the soil of shared deception. Tommy's questions became more frequent, more pointed. "Will Mama go to jail?" he asked one morning over breakfast, his small face scrunched with worry. The question echoed in our kitchen, bouncing off walls that had heard so many of Emma's lies. That evening, I found myself in our bedroom closet, finally ready to pack away the last of Emma's forgotten things. At the back, I discovered a small box I'd never seen before. Inside lay a journal, her handwriting filling pages with calculations, contact numbers, plans. But between the criminal logistics were other notes, observations about Tommy's first steps, about my work habits, about the security of our home life. She documented our love like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture, noting its patterns while remaining deliberately separate from its heart. Rachel came over that night after Tommy was asleep. We sat on the porch steps, sharing the weight of silence. Her hand found mine in the darkness, and for the first time since the revelation, I didn't feel the ghost of Emma's touch overlaying the present moment. "You know what's strange?" I said, watching shadows play across our lawn. "I'm almost grateful. Not for the betrayal, but for how it's forcing me to see everything clearly. Including myself." The news of Emma's arrest reached me on a quiet Sunday morning. Spanish authorities had caught up with her in a small coastal town outside Barcelona, far from the glamorous life she'd pretended to live on social media. The man she'd fled with had already turned himself in, trading information for leniency. Her carefully constructed castle of lies had crumbled into sand, washing away with the Mediterranean tide. I sat on our back porch, watching Tommy play in the autumn sunlight, his laughter carrying across the yard as he chased falling leaves. Rachel sat beside me, her presence steady and warm. Neither of us spoke. We'd learned that some moments need only silence to be complete. The investigation had revealed the full scope of Emma's deception, nearly $2 million in embezzled funds, a network of fake accounts, years of careful planning. Each detail should have felt like a fresh wound, but instead, they landed like autumn leaves, dead things finally falling away, making room for new growth. Tommy's questions about his mother had evolved, becoming more complex as he processed the truth in his own way. "Did Mama love the bad money more than me?" he asked one evening as I tucked him in. The question hung in the air like smoke, making my eyes burn. I gathered him close, feeling his small heart beating against mine. "Love isn't always simple, buddy," I said finally. "Sometimes people can love and still make choices that hurt the ones they love. But that's about them, not about you. You're worthy of all the love in the world." Later that night, I found myself in the garage, opening the last box of Emma's things I'd kept. Photos, letters, small mementos of our life together, each item now carried double meanings, like coins with two faces. The Emma who'd smiled in our wedding photos wasn't a complete lie, but she wasn't the complete truth either. She'd been both, the loving wife and the careful deceiver, the doting mother and the patient thief. Rachel found me there, sitting among the scattered pieces of my past. Without a word, she sat beside me on the concrete floor, her shoulder pressing against mine. She picked up a photo, Emma and me on our honeymoon, young and seemingly carefree. "You know what I see when I look at this?" she asked softly. "I see someone who believed in love completely. That's not weakness, that's courage. And you still have it, even after everything." Her words settled over me like a warm blanket, and I realized she was right. The man in that photo wasn't a fool for believing in love. He was brave for risking his heart. Just as I was brave now, letting Rachel see me among the wreckage of my past, trusting her with both my scars and my hope. The legal proceedings moved forward, each step taking Emma further from our daily reality. Her parents maintained contact, sending updates about Tommy's cousins' birthdays and family events, carefully avoiding mention of their daughter's situation. In their voices, I heard the same struggle I faced, learning to separate the love they felt from the actions that had betrayed it. One evening, as Rachel helped Tommy with his bedtime routine, a role she'd gradually grown into with natural grace, I overheard them talking. "Are you my new mama?" Tommy asked with a child's directness. Rachel's response came soft but clear. "No, sweetheart. You have a mama. I'm just Rachel, and I love you exactly as you are." That moment crystallized something I'd been feeling but couldn't name. Rachel wasn't trying to erase Emma from our story. She was helping us write new chapters while honoring the complexity of the old ones. She understood that love isn't about replacement, it's about expansion, about making room for new joy without denying past pain. Standing in our kitchen the next morning, watching Rachel and Tommy make pancakes together, their faces dusted with flour and bright with laughter, I felt something settle in my chest. Not the absence of pain, That would always be part of our story, but the presence of something stronger, the understanding that betrayal hadn't broken my capacity for love, it had deepened it. Emma's choices had shaped our lives in ways we'd never imagined, but they hadn't defined us. The man I'd become wasn't just a survivor of her deception. I was someone who'd learned that true strength lies not in avoiding vulnerability, but in choosing it anyway. Every time I opened my heart to Rachel, every time I helped Tommy process his feelings about his mother, I was choosing to believe in love again. The future stretched before us, not as a straight path but as a garden we'd tend together, Rachel, Tommy, and me. There would be shadows, certainly, but also sunshine, growth, and the kind of love that knows darkness but chooses light anyway. Emma's betrayal had taught me that love isn't always honest, but it had also shown me that honesty, when chosen daily, can build a love stronger than any deception could destroy. Thank you all for watching this video to the end. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe our channel.